You've tuned into InvisiYouth Chat Sessions, a video podcast series. Our episode starts right now. Here's your host, Dominique Vale.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the InvisiYouth Chat Sessions, where you can check in for your dose of stigma-breaking, humor-filling, motivation-loving life hacks and empowering tips for all of the medically adultish people in life. I'm your host, Dominique Vale, founder of InvisiYouth Charity, and today is a special day because it is the first episode of Season 5. We're at episode 60, and we are on the start of our new season. As you can tell if you're watching on our YouTube channel for the visual show, I did bring out my baby Christmas tree is still up and not being put away, and some of my apparent, what will be my 30th birthday decor ended up making it into my set room as well. So we are fully decorated for the episode to celebrate the start of season 5. And I am thrilled that our first guest of these incredible special guest lineup we have for season 5 is a fellow New Jerseyan. You know, I never get to say that on this show, so I'm super thrilled about it. We are going to have the two-time Paralympic gold medalist and parasport advocate, Jack Wallace, as our guest today. Jack, when he was 10 years old, was in a boating accident while water skiing and ended up needing to have a part of his right leg amputated. And while being introduced to parasports after that experience, he actually played ice hockey since he was very young, I think around probably 3 years old, I think. Jack grew into a deep interest in the sport of sled hockey, and I know many of you guys know that I always refer to sled hockey as the gateway sport to becoming a Paralympic sport enthusiast, so I highly recommend you look into this after the interview with Jack. It is so much fun to watch, trust me. And from there, he has been sharpening his skills on the ice ever since. Also a graduate from the College of New Jersey with a degree in biomedical engineering. Props to that. Would not have been my specialty to study. Jack now has national titles and 2 Paralympic gold medals with the U.S. Hockey National Sled Hockey team. He's expanding into summer parasport too to compete in paracanoe sprint kayaking, which is really incredible. And Jack really knows the value of hard work, sports, diverse representation, and adapting to excel, and has even become a mentor and counselor at the camp he went to as a child called Camp No Limits. He really uses his platform to pay it forward and share this message to other young people, especially in the disability community. So I'm thrilled to have him starting off season 5 with me. Jack, welcome to the show.
Wow, what an intro. Thank you so much.
Oh, you can just clip that and now send that off as your reel for people when they ask about you.
I might have to. That was a doozy.
Oh, well, I'm excited, like I said, to have you on. And like I mentioned at the top of the show, our podcast for everyone who's listening, you can listen on all of our podcast platforms or watch on our YouTube channel. So while you're listening for the rest of this hour and getting cozy, make sure you click that subscribe button, click that like or thumbs up, whatever you want to do. And we're going to now jump into our first segment called Remember the Last Time.
Remember the last time. Do you remember the last time? Remember.
All right, with Remember the Last Time, we're going to have a new spin on one of our original segments of the show and actually chat about a situation that I know many of you in the chronic illness and disability space have experienced. I know it's something that's very similar to my own experience and Jack as well. The fact that some of us who are in the chronic illness and disability space have actually developed our illness or disability later in life and weren't born with it. So we do have that pre-post illness disability lifespan marker, if you will. And so how do we kind of tackle life when you have to really shift gears and redirect how you're living it? Well, we're going to find out with Jack today. So like at the top of the show, I had mentioned that you ended up having to have part of your leg amputated after your boating accident when you were young. So you do have a very defined moment between life with a disability and then without. So for you, do you remember there being sort of what was your kind of biggest hurdle that you had to, besides the obvious physical one, what was it kind of going through that big adjustment to how you were then going to have to live life after the accident?
Yeah, obviously mobility was a huge, I won't say issue, but mobility was a huge change in my life, especially being a super active kid coming from a super active family. You know, I never sat still, was always running around. I'd ride my bike everywhere I went, or, you know, I'd be getting changed in the back of my parents' car from from football practice to hockey practice to baseball to whatever else. That initial part of my life where I really had to slow down, obviously started out in a wheelchair, moved to crutches, and then eventually getting a prosthetic and spending the years it takes to learn how to properly use a prosthetic and be efficient on it. A weird thing though for me is I think one of the biggest, changes, obviously over time I got used to, using the prosthetic throughout my daily life. But one of the biggest things was actually getting out of bed, whether it be in the middle of the night or just in the morning. Obviously, I love to sleep in, but I think this is just a separate part of it where normally if you wake up, take the covers off, stand up, walk to the bathroom, walk to the kitchen, do whatever you need to do. And now my situation is get up and I have the choice of either hopping, which is very loud. When I lived upstairs with my family, it was very loud for everyone. Or now when I live with my girlfriend, my partner, it can wake her up, but it also is potentially damaging for an amputee to be hopping around all the time. So I try and not do it a lot. So there's then the option of putting on a prosthetic, which kind of takes a little bit of time and it can be annoying sometimes. And I think that was just the biggest, obviously that wasn't the biggest hurdle, but just one of the biggest mental blocks I found was just, that simple action of getting up and out of bed to start your day. Because once I start, it's no problem. But that initial setup is just, I think that was just for some reason for me, that was just a mental hurdle.
Yeah, no. And I think, like you said, too, I think probably because of the way that television might even project it, it seems like such a smooth transition of you get a prosthetic and it's just you're smooth sailing once you learn how to put it on and start moving, that it is a long process of figuring out which one works well for you and how it works. And it's not like it takes 20 seconds and you're raring to go and ready. If you're waking up, you have to be very alert to get yourself ready. And then if you want to go back to sleep, then you're very wide awake by that point to go through it. So I would imagine that trying to change something that's so subconsciously natural to you is hard to switch when your body is then having to do something differently. Which I think for a lot of people, it's that you said, it is that mental hurdle. It's sort of, you can kind of learn to adjust to the things you need to do for your health, but then it's that mental hurdle of, oh, this used to be so easy before, and now I have to think of all these different ways to figure out how to do something that I was able to just kind of get up and go.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think I was going to ask too, because I know for everyone who knows me through the charity knows that I played competitive tennis for 8 years and I got injured in off-season training and now have a neurovascular condition and I have nerve damage on my left side. So kind of relearning my dominant side was my left, and relearning how to write and walk and do all of those things. On top of just sort of the medical issues was so challenging. I was 16. So to try to relearn everything while still being in school and doing all of those things, it was like, it was very challenging to try and be like, okay, I can't do it this way anymore. And then not get frustrated with myself or get frustrated at the situation. So even now, it's been 14 years for me since I got injured. People will think even as so much time passes, you don't find those moments of just getting a bit frustrated of being able to do something that you would just instinctually think to do. How do you kind of tackle that moment for yourself if you ever kind of feel frustrated, something's not as easy as you would want it to be?
Yeah, those are always really tough moments because you obviously kind of get into your own rhythm, get into your own groove, and things are working out. Or let's say for me, when I was in college, this actually happened a lot. Obviously in college, extremely social environment, very stressful environment. And I was on a pretty small campus. The College of New Jersey is pretty small, so most of the time I ended up walking to class. But on certain days, if my prosthetic wasn't working, it's like, well, what do I do? And those times are extremely frustrating and very annoying. But at that point, you just take the step back, analyze step by step. Okay, what do I need to do to accomplish this? What do I need to do to come up with a solution? And even more frustrating sometimes was when for whatever reason, my particular prosthetic, sometimes it's an older version, the valve would get squeaky. So every time I take a step,
no.
it would almost like whistle or let out a little squeak. And it was pretty loud and extremely annoying. And I'd be walking through very big groups of people or inside or through a classroom. People would always be like, what's that noise? What is that? And then I'd stop moving and it would stop, and it would kind of like, who would notice and all that stuff. So that's just a smaller thing where it's not as much of a problem, but it can still be just as frustrating and annoying as even the bigger problems.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I think it's that the school environment, whether you're in high school or go in university, that trying to adjust what you do to help yourself medically or with your disability, and then now having kind of a new audience around you and a new physical terrain to deal with is what people have to realize, is those change the way you have to adapt. You have to then kind of readjust what is your kind of baseline of adapting, which I don't think people take into consideration. And like you said, it's natural to get frustrated because it is a sucky situation to have to be in, that wasn't sort of the trajectory you were planned on when you were growing up, and then something shifts and derails it, and you have to readjust and do that. So to know that telling people it's okay to be frustrated, but then let yourself be frustrated for a few minutes and then move forward from that. Like, let yourself have this is really annoying moment and then move beyond that is super important. I can definitely understand. I went to St. Joseph's in Philadelphia, which is very up and down hilly and has lots of stairs with no elevators. And so fun when you have a partial cardiac condition as well, trying to not look like you're about to pass out getting into a lecture hall and everyone's going, what's wrong? And I'm like, I'm fine. Don't worry about it. And like just stumbling into the first seat, trying to breathe and feel my leg. But I definitely can understand with that. I think that would be good for people to know how to adjust to that kind of frustration. And then I think also, was there ever, how did you kind of, because I'll always say to people, you always hear, oh, having a support network is really beneficial and having those people around you. But when it's just sort of you in the moment, you kind of have to have things to kind of pick yourself up out of those sort of moments of you kind of thinking of the what if, that people a lot of times think, well, what would it be like for me now if I didn't have my illness or disability, or what would I be doing? And so how do you do you have those moments? And then also, if you do, how do you kind of handle not kind of falling into the trap of sort of the what if scenario or that kind of spiral?
Yeah, I think I can only speak for myself, but I can only assume that just about every single person dealing with something like this has gone through that and has asked themselves that so many times they lost count. But when I get in that state of mind, I won't say I was lucky enough, but I got hurt at a pretty young age, to the point where I hadn't really developed a specific mentality yet. And I was only 10 years old, to the point where I can remember everything, but as a 10-year-old, you're obviously still very immature and still need to learn so many things. So I'll credit my support system in giving me the mentality that I still have to this day, where no one has a time machine. You can't go back and change anything. And I also feel the more I progressed and the more success I had in my own life, the more I realized, why would I want to go back and change things? This is my life. I'm happy with my life. I love my life. So, if you think about it, well, this is an aside, but I think it really speaks to the point. The following summer, on that same lake that I got injured on, a kid died in a very similar accident. And my parents didn't tell me right when it happened, but we were talking later on. And it's one of those things where, yeah, maybe if you don't get injured in the way you did, or don't develop that illness or whatever it may be, the next day you could get hit by a car. Your life might be so different. So you can always think about how much better it would be, but you can also think about how much worse it could be. So it's one of those things where you got to take the good with the bad and understand that you can't change the past. So you just got to move forward and try and be as positive as possible and be thankful for what you do have and what you still can accomplish. Because in many situations, especially one like mine, I could have died 5 times that day. So it's just one of those things about your own perspective where you got to understand that you got to take the good with the bad.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point too, because it kind of, in a way, it's the situation or what had happened might be negative, but that doesn't have to imprint on how you look at yourself. It's sort of that piece of it was a bad experience and resulted in a traumatic change in your life, but that doesn't have to imprint on the way you view yourself moving forward. And if you can kind of separate those two, it lets you look at things more positively, but not in that sort of, we call it the rainbows and sunshine positive, where you're not looking at anything realistically, but it lets you kind of be able to really look at yourself and separate your illness or disability as a portion of you, but not all of you. And it didn't adjust everything. Yeah,
for sure.
That's a really good point to end it on. Jack, star for the first segment. We can just fly on to the next one with that. But before we do, you guys know that I love some good subtle activism. It is like the Starbucks cup in the scene of Game of Thrones. We love for you to have some activism that is not super showy, but a way for you to support a nonprofit and be able to spread awareness in the world about the chronic illness and disability community of young people. And that's why we created the InvisiYouth charity shop. You'll see that popping up on the side, that we have our subtle activist color block bracelets. I am wearing a couple of them today, if you can see, and they are handmade by our teens and young adults who have chronic illness and disability in our signature gray and yellow colors. And they're very easy to put on and adjustable, and only $4 exclusively on our Etsy shop with free global shipping. And 100% of every sale goes towards helping to provide our free resources and programming every month for incredible young people like yourselves in the chronic illness and disability space. So we always drop our Etsy link below. So if you would like to buy a bracelet for yourself or for someone you care about, that would be paying it forward and basically be like you giving a $4 donation and getting some subtle activism in your life as well. So we highly encourage and thank you guys for doing that for us and checking out our shop. And now we're going to go into our next segment called Break That Glass Ceiling.
Break that glass ceiling. Break that glass ceiling.
All right, Break That Glass Ceiling is one of my favorite segments because I get to chat about cracking those stigmas that really tend to plague the chronic illness and disability space. And we're going to chat about a topic that we constantly get asked about in the DMs with InvisiYouth, but are always never asked about in the front eye with the charity. So we're going to chat with Jack about the dynamic of chronic illness and disability and masculinity, and really how to better understand the guys in this community that a lot of times don't get the same representation that you'll see with so many of the young women in the space. So I know a huge topic I'd mentioned when Jack and I talked ahead of the show was that for us and so many others, the chronic illness and disability space tends to be very geared female oriented or have a very large female audience at times, unless it's sort of in the sport realm where you'll definitely have people across the board and giving those different diverse perspectives. Is that something you've ever noticed, or do you feel that there's a difference in the way that they'll talk about illness or disability when it comes to men and women?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a good part of it is just the current state of advocacy in the country and throughout the world. I think there's just a lot more advocacy for women's rights, as there should be, going into things. So I feel like there's already that huge base of support for women and female advocacy and equal rights. So I think it's a pretty quick doorway when you're a woman dealing with chronic illness or disability to jump right in. You have plenty of supporters. I can't say the same is true for male rights. So I think maybe that could be part of it, but another side of it would obviously be talking about disability or chronic illness in some ways can be seen by some as weakness or vulnerability. And as far as masculinity goes, those don't really mix in the very stereotypical forms. So I think a big part of it is, just trying to break that stigma of, that toxic masculinity of men understanding that talking about something that makes you different or a disability or something like that does not necessarily make you weak, and that you can find really good support systems. You can help yourself out a lot. And I think we have come a little bit further, even since I got injured. In this group, there's lots of different advocates for mental health, especially through sport. We've seen a lot of it through sport in the past few years, but once again, that is being driven by women. Simone Biles, obviously in the Tokyo Games, took a huge stance on that, and fantastic by her to do that. So, but those rumblings and those slow growth through male sports. You see it in the NHL. I'm a hockey player, so you do see that slowly growing through the NHL, and I do like to see that. But it's all about breaking that stigma for men.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like you said, there's sort of what we'll always say, obviously, this whole segment on my end, I'm talking as a general advocate and running the charity. Clearly, I am female, just if we need to identify that. So my perspective is not going to be from the lived experience. That will be Jack's domain for us in this segment. But what we've really noticed is, especially in the social media and the virtual space, using different apps, using Instagram or using platforms to do advocacy work or sharing about your life, it is very much geared towards, it's encouraged for women to be vulnerable using their social media apps and sharing about their day. And then we've noticed a lot with the younger men that use them, it's a lot about showing the sports they use or hanging out with their friends and sort of getting real in the caption or sharing about things they're going through. It tends to not happen unless it's this very big event, or they're sharing it 6 months after it happened. And it's like, this is my 6-month post-op post that I'm doing. And so we've noticed there's that kind of shift in sharing kind of the daily things that are going on. And if it happens to deal with an illness or disability, like you touched on, there's this, and that's just sort of across the board, is there's this lesser than stigma that you now have a lack of capability because of your health being in a different position than the stereotype of what healthy looks like. And like you said, that's so valuable to when people in public spaces can kind of mirror the experience. It lets you kind of trickle down. I know for us, a big thing was when we saw one of the NBA players, Kevin Love, started his own foundation for mental health. And to see, not only for us, it was so appreciative to see so many of his teammates and then people he played against all following the charity. And for years now, seeing them all just comment on it, even if it has nothing to do with Kevin talking, it's just them being so supportive of what mental health in the space of athletes was really nice to just see across the board, people just being so supportive of the fact that having an illness or disability naturally will affect how you feel mentally at times. And to know that there's a network out there that lets you kind of have that support is super important for young people to know that they can go searching for it. And like you said, if there are more men being more public about it, or young guys being more public about sort of what that kind of struggle can be like at times, it lets other people just in their life feel, I can share this with my friends. When they ask how I'm doing, I don't have to just say, I'm fine. If something's actually going on, you can actually share. And I feel like I was going to ask too, do you think there's things that might inhibit sort of young guys that have an illness or disability from answering that question honestly? Or even on your own end, do you feel like there's moments where you're like, I don't feel like I want to answer that you do feel like there's a bit of a block on actually kind of answering when people say, how are you feeling, or how are you?
Yeah, I think it's I definitely think that a lot of people are working to end that stigma, but I still think it's rooted really deep in a lot of us. It certainly was in me. It's one of the things I'm trying to work on is, communicate better and be more open and deal with that stuff rather than sit on it and let it brew. But no, I definitely do think that a lot of young guys struggle with that. Trying to, it's that self-esteem, that ego that I think everyone deals with, but maybe it's especially more significant in men, their ego, where they are okay to be vulnerable, but if it's vulnerability at the expense of their disability or chronic illness, then maybe that makes them feel even more uncomfortable about it. Where, sports obviously are a classic analogy, but if you lose a game, you can just say like, oh yeah, I'm feeling sad because I lost a game. Or where it's like, if you're feeling bad about a very serious topic or your illness or your disability, then maybe you don't want to drop that bomb on someone casually, where you don't know, maybe that person would be totally willing to help you and talk about it with you, a close friend or a family member or a mentor or whatever. But at the same time, I think there's just that wall that's been there for a while, and hopefully it starts, getting taken down over time.
Yeah. And I think, like you said too, it's kind of finding people that it's good to sort of, we call it at InvisiYouth, we call it the faucet theory, where it's, you can change the amount of water you release out of the faucet at your own sort of independence and your own control. So you can kind of test people out a bit, if you will, of dropping little bits of information about how things might be going if you're dealing with a lot when it comes to your health or your disability, and it's impacting how you're handling things socially or being in school or at work. You can kind of drop little things and put those little droplets in, and you'll see which of your friends or coworkers respond well, or kind of that empathetic person will come forward. And then you can kind of, oh, that person might be good to lean more a bit into, and then that person you might then drop a little bit more in front of the next time. And so it's sort of testing out your audience in a way, kind of like a comedian testing their material. You kind of have to test out who would be good to kind of hear and be that listener, similar to yourself. At times there's some times where I have so much with my health going on, I wouldn't be the best listener for my friends because I have so much going on. But there's that open communication, because some of us both have illnesses, and my friends who are non-disabled and healthy, they know as well. They can they'll be like, is it you're having a good health day or a bad health day? And I'll be like, it's a bad one. And they'll be like, oh, do you want to talk about it? And they know yes or no, because I tend to be a bit more reserved about the ins and outs of my illnesses. So we kind of set the tone very early. This is what makes me comfortable or not. And I think if you figure out who you can kind of set that tone with, you can easily, like you were saying, Jack, kind of break that mold a bit easier. Because those stereotypes we always joke, it's like the stereotype of like having to be the provider, and the provider requires you to have like a perfectly healthy body, which is just ridiculous. That you are just as successful as an athlete and an individual as any other athlete who is doing this professionally as well. So it's just your version of a sport looks different than other versions of sports. And that's literally it. I tell people that all the time. I said, if you watch parasport, it's sport. It's called sports for a reason. It's the same thing. And it's me doing my work is the same as any other founder or another philanthropist doing their work. It's just sometimes I have to do my work differently looking, but we still achieve the same thing. So if you can remind people of that when you're thinking they're questioning it, I think is really vital. And I was going to kind of end that. I was going to ask you, because you're on a sports team, you had with being on the national team as well with sled hockey, you're around so many other guys who have different disabilities and across that spectrum. So have you noticed there's things that you guys seem to be more comfortable being vulnerable and talking to each other about? You notice that when you're at practice that there's something besides obviously talking about your work. I'm not saying that you guys like don't talk strategy, but outside of the work portion, are there things that you have noticed that is easier for you to get vulnerable with, that you're like, wow, I wish other guys knew they could do this too outside of just this environment?
Yeah, definitely. Since the pandemic, we got a new coach in 2019, and we've been a really close roster since the 2018 Paralympics, and it's pretty much been the same core group of guys up until now. So that was 4 really long years of training to get to Beijing. And our new coach put a really big emphasis on mental health and cohesiveness together, and just being willing to talk and share. We actually have one of the assistant coaches on the team, obviously he's a hockey coach, but his full-time job is also a counselor at a university.
Wow.
So he's been a fantastic resource. We've actually had we've had people on the team use him as a resource. We've had people use the therapists that work with the USOPC, but we've also, we've talked to each other. I've definitely had experiences where I've delved a little bit more into stuff I was dealing with my teammates than maybe I would have in the past. And it really felt good. It really, it created an even better bond with those guys. And I think that bond even translates onto the ice. Being able to share and have each other's back like that, not even just on the ice or off the ice physically, but emotionally, and being that support, being an extra piece of their support system is a great feeling when you're supporting, and it's a great feeling when you have it for yourself. So I think it's in recent years, I've absolutely noticed that with our team. We have a really close roster, and it's funny, like we have such a wide range of people on our team, to from young kids that are just playing sled hockey for the first time, all the way up to 38-year-olds who got injured in Afghanistan. So there's a really wide range of people on our team, and I think that just speaks to the chemistry and locker room dynamic that we and our coach have helped create over the past few years. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, and I love that it's not only, it's really like a trickle down. It goes beyond just you guys building that friendship and dynamic and then feeling comfort, sort of venting and talking to each other, but then also having that your coaches be able to also, that it kind of provides you a subconscious safety net, if you will, without even utilizing them. That it's there, so it kind of lets you be more relaxed, knowing people are there for you if you need them, and so you can kind of feel that subconscious stress release kind of taken off because that they're available. And I think that's really important. Anytime we've had guys come in as volunteers, and they'll always say, oh, well, I don't really tell my friends about my illness or my disability. I try to hide it because sometimes they'll just use it as a joke, at which I totally understand. Teenagers getting injured as a teenager. Jack's nodding his head. A lot of times that tends to be their knee-jerk reaction when they get nervous, is they just need to make a joke, and that sometimes will be their first avenue to go in. But I'll always say to them, you can set the tone for yourself in a nice way. If you have to understand that your own improving yourself is super important, and feeling that comfort of sharing different things is going to make yourself a better person, but then also make your relationships with people better. And if certain people aren't comfortable, or they don't feel they have the experiences, I think that's the biggest thing when you have an illness or disability. And I would imagine you might even relate that for friends of yours who might not. I'll always have for the friends of mine who don't have an illness or disability, they feel like they can't compare their struggles to my struggles because mine just seem very different to theirs. So they don't want to kind of vent their issues with mine, which would be kind of the natural emotional support. So I always tell, especially the guys that we'll have as volunteers, I'm like, remind your friends, like, you're not trying to have them relate on your level of your illness or disability, because like they can't if they don't have it. So if you kind of set that tone early, I think for a lot of the younger guys we've seen, that's been helpful for them, as they really do kind of let their friends know, I'm not expecting you to understand everything I'm going through. It's just be that listening ear, and then just like be the support. If I need someone to show up or help, like just come in and do it, and kind of be that nonverbal support for me. I don't need you to relate 100% to the experience.
Yeah. And I think that almost gets into the topic. I've heard it described, I don't know what the official term is, but I've heard it described as almost like people trying to score their, their issues, or their, whatever you want to call it. They try and score it and see who has the worst one. And it's like, you can't really do that, because everyone deals with stuff differently. You could have the same disability or illness as someone else, and have completely different lives and react to it completely differently. So I think I think that's just a natural human thing to do. People will look at me and be like, oh my God, they'll feel bad for me, or they'll be like, oh, I'm praying for you. And it's like, why are you praying for me? Like I have a pretty good life. Like I'm doing good, so it's like, just because I'm missing a leg, it doesn't mean that my life is way worse than yours. I have different struggles for sure. I doubt your knee just stops working or you forget to charge it at night or something like that, but it's still, you can't put a number on it or a value on it and compare them because they're just non-comparable.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, definitely. And in the chronic illness space, you'll find it funny being a Paralympian. They call it the Chronic Illness Olympics, where you're trying to one up one another. So I was like, I'll tell Jack because he'll find that funny. So that's what that was. Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point to end it on before we go in our second half of the show. And like, I love to tell people at this halfway point of the podcast, I always just like to thank them that you've gotten halfway through the episode so far. And like we always say, this is part of our virtual programming for the nonprofit. And we provide about 5 different resources monthly through our virtual resources that are free, and our volunteer program that is super flexible, and our activism campaigns that you can get involved in. And we pop our donate link below, because 100% of our resources and programs are provided for free for the thousands of teens and young adults around the world in the 8 countries we work in, for them to have access to it every month. So if you're able to donate to support our nonprofit, that means so much to us. If you are able to right now, as I transition into our next segment, click that subscribe button. It helps keep our lights on, and that is super helpful for all of us here at InvisiYouth. So we definitely appreciate it. And you guys know we are bringing it back because it is the most favorite segment. It's my favorite segment. It's yours. It's So That One Time.
So that one time.
Guys, it's So That One Time I get to sit back and relax and drink my coffee as our guests tell us a story so we all can stop hearing my voice ask questions. So, Jack, the mic is yours to tell everybody a story.
Okay, so it's kind of a 2-parter, but they tie together very, very well. And it actually, like you said, I have 2 gold medals. And obviously, in order to win those gold medals in hockey, it's a tournament-based system where you play a round-robin tournament and then a semifinal. And then if you win that, you get into the gold medal game. So for us, it's different than a lot of other athletes, where it's a very long tournament, like where we're playing games the whole time. And instead of having one singular event where that's your medal event, or 2 events in the beginning of the Paralympics and 2 events at the end of the Paralympics, or however other events are scheduled. So for me, that means obviously I had to play in 2 gold medal games, and those are right off the bat going to be the most stressful. There's the most pressure, because this is what years and years and years of training have led up to, this one singular game, each singular shift being, it's almost overwhelming the amount that rides on that. So my story is that in both, right before both gold medal games, I maybe had some of the most ridiculous and unplanned adversity you can think of. So in 2018, when I won the first one, essentially the night before the gold medal game, we had 2 personnel changes where 2 of my teammates couldn't compete that day or the next day. So, and I had been playing forward all year. I'd been training to be a forward. I basically put all my eggs in one basket to play as a forward, to play offense. And then the morning of the gold medal game, I get a text, "You're playing defense tonight." Oh, no. So just throws me for an absolute loop. I get to the rink. I am a nervous wreck. I'm trying to remember all the different plays, all the different lingo that defensemen use, and all this different stuff going on. And then luckily one of my teammates, the captain of the team now, Josh Pauls, he just comforted me, said, "Hey, you know how to do this. You're a good player," all that stuff, put me on the same mind track. So I'm like, okay, that's good. And then obviously we went and won. I had a decent game. So fast forward 4 years to 2022, I'm like, all right, that's not happening again. I wake up, I'm like, I know what position I'm playing. We even made the joke about it. We always joke about it. Like, I know what position I'm playing. Like, we're good to go. Like, I'm ready for this. I've already done it once. No need to be as nervous as I was 4 years ago. So I get all my stuff together and start heading to the rink. And then I forget we all head out in a group because we're in one big Team USA building. And I'm like, oh, I forgot my headphones in my room, whatever I forgot. I don't even remember. So I run back up quick, and this is plenty of time. We were very early for the bus at the village. Everyone gets on a bus and goes to the rink together. So I run up to my room. My teammates go ahead and I'm like, oh, I'll catch up with you at the bus station. This is like 20 minutes before our bus is supposed to leave. So I take 5 minutes in the room, come back down. I walk to the bus stop by myself. And then I get to the bus stop and I pass through the security checkpoint. And once you pass through the security checkpoint, the village Wi-Fi turns off. And this is in China, so I don't have any cell service.
Oh, no.
So I keep walking and then I don't see anyone. And I'm like, this is weird. And I keep walking and I walk around the corner and there's no more buses. And I see that the Canadian team is getting on their bus. We were playing Canada in the gold medal game. And then all of a sudden I just start, for some reason, I have this thought like, oh, they must be all in the mess hall and like wanted to grab food before the bus. I guess I'm just early. Like I'm early for the bus because it was whatever it was. It was a 2:30 bus and I was there at 2:20. So apparently my whole team had miscounted how many players were at the bus stop. And because there's two separate buses, guys kind of like load in at their own time. And because one of them is an accessible bus and one's a normal bus, or, just no ramps or anything. So some of the wheelchairs and some of the what we call wheelchairs and walkers go on one bus and then kind of fill into the other bus. So they had miscounted. So they left 15 minutes early. So I'm sitting there at the bus stop, no cell service, no idea what's going on. And at this point, I was obviously very nervous for the gold medal game. And then just this gave me, eventually a very nice Chinese volunteer came up to me, asked me what was going on. Initially, I was very rude to him because of how stressed out I was. But then I thanked him. I gave him a pin and I was like, I'm sorry. I'm just very stressed out. And he was like, I understand. He's a great guy and got me my own bus to the rink, got me there on time. But on the bus ride there, I had a full-on panic attack. The volunteer actually saw how nervous I was, and he held the bus for like 2 minutes and ran into a building and then ran back outside and had a gift wrapped for me and handed me, because for some reason he thought it was like his fault. But or whatever, he was like apologizing, and he gave me like a Chinese Lego set. It was actually cool. Yeah, so I still have that in my room. I want to keep that one, but that was so both gold medals I've played, gold medal games that I've played in have just started on the worst notes possible. But luckily, I guess that's kind of the theme, that whatever as long as something wrong goes down for me, that the team will win. So I don't know what I need to be ready for in Italy in 2026, but I'm ready for it.
Oh my God. Can you imagine your teammates are probably secretly hoping something goes south the night before? They're like, something needs to go wrong for Jack, because then we're going to win.
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh my God. Oh, and I love that you got a gift too. It's just like they're panicked for you, going, oh my God, please.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. That actually transitions really well into our last segment of the show, where we can talk more about the Paralympics with Jack. We're going to go into Path to Power.
Path to Power.
All right. The phrase we hear often is the power of sports. And as a Paralympic gold medalist in sled hockey, we know that Jack definitely knows the power of sports and the value of that empowering your life. So we are going to talk about the things that gets to add and benefit to your life physically and mentally, and ways that we can be empowered through sport, and how some of you guys can get involved in some different activities and put some parasport into your life as well, or become a avid watcher like I am, which I encourage people to watch when Paralympics come on at all times. So I know you were an athlete, like you had mentioned, prior to your accident, and then that transitioned into parasport after. And I know I'd mentioned at the top that when you had gone to the camp that you now do counseling and mentor work with Camp No Limits, that kind of really played into it. So for you, was there a main reason you went to that camp? And then also, what did you kind of leaving that the first time? What did you feel like this was the thing I gained the most out of going to a camp that's really, you can describe it, but it's a camp really designed for young people like yourself at that time?
Yeah, Camp No Limits is it's a magical place. It really is. It's unbelievable. And essentially what it is it's a summer camp for kids and families dealing with limb loss. They're one of the few places that takes into account the full family story, where there's the perspective of the child going through it, whether it's, congenital, disease-based, or traumatic. Then there's also the parents' perspective, where they're dealing with insurance and bills and that utter stress ball that comes with all that stuff and being a parent. And then there's also the sibling perspective, where now there's one of the kids of the family seeming like they're getting all this undue attention. Really, they do need that attention to progress in their life, but at the same time, it seems almost unfair to those other siblings. So they take a full family approach, and it's one of the few places on the planet that does it like that. And it's a fantastic place for everyone to go. And I went there the summer after my injury. I had tried to go to different support groups at the hospital where I had gotten my surgery and the hospital that I was doing my rehab at, Robert Wood Johnson. And then essentially what happened is I go into the support group, and it's a bunch of 40-plus-year-olds,
So you felt right at home.
Yeah, diabetes, motorcycle accidents, cancer, what have you. I'm the only child in there, let alone minor, and I'm like, how am I going to relate to any of these people? I want to leave. My mom's like, okay, yeah, clearly we're not getting anything out of this. But then we find out about this camp, and I get to the camp and I see this 18, 19-year-old quad amputee. He's missing all 4 limbs, and he's running around on running blades. He's throwing a frisbee with no hands. He's throwing a football with a perfect spiral. And I'm just like, wait, what is this place? What's going on here? Because, I'd never seen a young, active, fit person that was also an amputee yet in my life. And as far as I had never even seen another child amputee. So I felt very isolated in those early months of being an amputee, especially in my school. I was the only kid in my school with a physical disability. So it was very difficult transitioning. But then I get to this camp where there's full of children, full of people at all different stages of dealing with their limb difference or limb loss. And it really just... I wouldn't say it made me feel at home, but it made me feel not so different, which is, I think, the most important part about it. It makes you realize that you're not the only one, that you can develop the support system. I've made amazing lifelong friends at that camp, people I still talk to this day. And it's just for a kid to come in and see that, I know firsthand the power that has. So at this point, as an adult, I'm trying to do that for someone else as much as I possibly can, because I know firsthand how much it can really change someone's life. So at that first camp I went to, obviously I was talking to one of the counselors, and they asked me what my favorite sport was. I told them hockey, and then boom, right away they were like, oh, have you heard of sled hockey? And then long story short, here we are.
No, and I love that, because like I had mentioned to you as well, that me doing sports, it was never mentioned to me that there were any form of adaptive sports until I was well into my 20s running InvisiYouth, and we had our first celebrity ambassador, Victoria Arlen, who's a Paralympic swimmer and works for ESPN. And I had never even known that was an option for myself, because there is that stereotype of what Paralympic athletes are doing adaptive sports looks like. And I thought, all right, well, I just have nerve damage and it's an illness. I don't think that counts. And no doctor or physical therapist who knew I treated PT like I was in my tennis training for my 4-hour agility camps that like 6 days a week I was in. That's how I treated PT, they were my coaches. And no one had mentioned it to me. And so I always think that it's so important when you're in sort of, even with doctors, mentioning your hobbies to people that you're around, that you had before an illness or disability is so important, because like for yourself, that opened a whole new avenue for you, that if you didn't answer that question, you're like, oh, I can't play sports anymore, and you just didn't answer, it wouldn't have even been offered to you as an option, and then this whole direction of your life wouldn't have happened. So I always tell people, really, there are so many adaptations you don't even realize are available in the world, and just really see who knows what about anything, because that's so really important. And I wanted also, kind of off of that, do you feel like there's different values or pillars you've learned from getting into parasports at a young age and going through that and being in your 20s now and doing it at such a professional level, like things that the sport itself has really drilled into you and how you view and approach life?
Yeah. Even to go back to your further point, or your other point, where when I was in the hospital, actually, I even had a doctor telling me, you're probably not going to be able to walk again. And he literally said, you're definitely not going to be able to run again. You're never playing hockey again. All this stuff where, I think a lot of people, even if they're really good at their one job, they obviously can't know everything, and whoever this doctor was, I don't know his name. I don't think my parents know his name, but I always have that memory in my head where it's like, not everyone, like who is he to say that? Who is he to put a limit on what I can and can't do? So I think, it is always up to you, the individual, to go out and research and advocate for yourself, but also learn as much as possible in those situations where, if I hadn't just bumped into that counselor and started talking to him, maybe I would have never known about sled hockey. And that is a very scary, scary thought.
It is. It's a good sport, people. I'm telling you, I told Jack, it's my favorite of every Paralympic sport.
Yeah. But as far as Paralympic sports go, obviously, when I was younger, it was extremely helpful for me to start getting active again, just to feel like a normal kid again, going to practice, going to play these games, getting that competitive drive. I'm an extremely competitive person. I have been my whole life. So having that input, especially in a physical sense, because I also played a lot of video games. And in that period, I was obviously playing almost all video games and trying to put all my competitive drive into that. And that doesn't, some people it works for, it definitely wasn't working for me. So being able to put that physical energy into something else and get all the benefits out of it. But also, I think just sports in general teach you so much as a young adult, all throughout your life, the teamwork, leadership, discipline, the classic, very stereotypical sports things. But if you're an athlete and you play sports, you will attest to it, and you can develop those skills, and it can help you later in life. And if parasports weren't a thing, I think I might have had trouble developing all those skills and learning all about that stuff. So I'm very grateful for sled hockey and now paracanoe to keep challenging myself and keep myself driving and keeping that competitive edge, because it helps me obviously in my life physically. My health is really good because I hold myself to a high standard, because it is my job to be in good shape. But also I think, if not with all my other ventures, to pour whenever I try and do something, I try and pour myself into it and try and absolutely tackle it to the best of my ability. Rather than, just doing a once-off thing and kind of not really caring about it. And that also helps me turn stuff down, where it's like, oh, there's this opportunity for you. And it's like, well, I know I'm not going to be able to do it full force because my schedule's full or whatever. And I think it's part of that discipline that you learn over time, where it can help you obviously in sport, but then even out in the professional world gives you a lot of benefits too.
Yeah. And I think too, it shows you that like achievement isn't linear. I think once you have an illness or disability, the way that you achieve and have success and win things feels like you're watching people, or you're used to the stereotype of how you've seen it be achieved or find success. And then your lane looks different because of the ways you have to get to it, or you have to adapt to excel in that. So when you get into doing anything with athletics or doing any sort of adaptive sports or doing that, It's finding that achievement really isn't linear. It's what might have been like a typical 4 steps for someone else. It might take you 6 or 8, but you're still getting to that end goal. And if once you can see that other people you're now achieving things, but you're achieving them differently, it gives you that more, you have like that instinct of, I want to be able to achieve more. And then you look at your adaptations as new challenges, and you have to be more creative to achieve different things, or how can I adapt this to make it easier for my body or my health to do, to still get to do the thing that I want. So if you kind of look at it in a different way, your achievements and what might take you longer to get to that success point actually probably wouldn't be as bothersome at times, because you're still learning that your success will be like someone else's. It's just not in the same trajectory.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have to end the show, but before we do, I have to ask 2 very important, these are the most important questions. Jack, you'll get the entire show. Number 1, where do you have your 2 gold medals? Everyone needs to know this. You're like, they're right in front of me.
Actually, that's a really good question. Let me see. Are they in front of me right now? They are actually. They're in my desk. Yeah, they're right here. I have them wrapped up in this little thing.
Oh, there we go.
Sometimes they're in a safe. Sometimes they're just laying around. My sister has used them for her coaster for her morning coffee before. So, they usually just sit around every once in a while, and they get taken out when they need to be.
Oh my God, I love that. And then final question, what is one goal you have for yourself? You get to go and be on the national team for sled hockey in the next Winter Games. What is the one thing you want to do besides getting a gold medal? Because obviously that's what you're going to tell me. But besides that, what's one goal or something that you want to do while you're there?
I think it's less a goal for during the games. Obviously, during the games, I want to be as dialed in and just as involved as I can be in those games and try and do every little thing right. But I think along the way, a big goal of mine is to develop myself, but also help the team develop as much as possible. And we have a lot of young guys coming on the roster now, and they have so much potential. And if I could somehow, any way I can somehow help them become a greater player, like when I had first made the team, guys had helped me become a good player. I want to be able to do that. And that's one of my goals, to get these younger guys on the same level as the rest of the team, so the team can be even stronger and winning gold can be even easier for us.
Oh, see, I that's so like motivational. I was expecting you to be like, oh, this is the part in the city I wanted to go to, or see, that's such a better answer, being like, I want to be a tourist this time around.
No, I definitely want to explore Italy a lot, but our tournament's very busy, so we don't get a lot of downtime.
I was going to say, you probably don't get to explore all these cities that you actually have gotten to go to, because you're really actually playing your sport throughout the entire
we usually
games.
only get 1 or 2 days off, so it's tough. But
maybe extend it after the closing ceremony, an extra day or 2 for yourself.
That plan is already in the works.
You're like, oh, Dominique, that's already been set in motion. Don't worry. Jack, yeah. I had so much fun having you on the show. It was a great opener for season 5, and I want people to be able to find you on social media. So where can people find you or give you a follow?
Yeah, all my social accounts are jwallace_USA. I also have a website, jackwallace.me. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Perfect. We're going to have that linked below in the description and in the show notes if you're listening. And as always, you can find InvisiYouth on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at InvisiYouth. The InvisiYouth Chat Sessions is on every podcast platform you can subscribe to. So Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, all of the above. And on our YouTube channel, you can watch our chat show over there. Actually, YouTube now has handles. So it's youtube.com/@InvisiYouth, I believe. If I'm incorrect, just Google it, and pretty much there. And all of those will be in the description as well. Jack, again, thank you so much for being our season opener. I had so much fun getting to chat with you today.
No, thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Perfect. Everyone, thank you so much for listening and watching, and I will speak with you all soon. Bye, everybody.